Hi everyone, Caoimhin here from CIT's Blackrock Castle Observatory. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the morning sky for the coming week, from the 1st of November through to about the 8th. We will be looking at the morning sky, so we're here looking at just 8 o'clock. If we move back towards 7 o'clock, we'll start to see some bright objects in the sky. Even this late in the year, later than about 7 o'clock, you won't see too much. Here we can see Venus, the bright star Sirius, and the moon, but we will have to go a little before 7 to see much more than the brightest objects. So here we are around 6:45. We can see a good few more stars, and just over here right next to the sun is the planet Mercury. We're going to be concentrating on these morning time objects for these and showing how they'll change and move across the sky. So if you're interested in the evening time planets and you didn't catch the video that we posted last weekend, well, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the blue bell icon. That'll make sure you get notified for all of the videos we post and you won't miss anything interesting. So, looking at about 6:45 on the 1st of November, Mercury is a tiny, almost invisible dot very close to this orange-yellow glow of sunrise, which does make it more difficult to see. However, as we get later into November, Mercury will reach its greatest elongation. So here on the 8th, still at just 6:45, Mercury is much further from that orange-yellow glow. The sky is a little darker. We are still moving towards midwinter, and that makes Mercury considerably easier to see. Of course, if we continue to move forward, Mercury would reach its greatest elongation on the 10th of November and then drift away from its greatest elongation. So even though Mercury is going to get easier to see for the first week of the month, it will then progressively get harder to see and vanish from our view before the end of November. So if you'd like to get a closer look at Mercury, you're going to have to pick the right date to go outside. And that can be tricky because it all depends on your area and your view of the sky. As close as possible to the 10th, so here we are on the 8th, that is going to make it a little bit easier to see. The earlier in the morning you go out, the darker the sky will be, and the better the view you get through our telescope. So here at around 6:20 on the 8th, we can definitely take a close before the orange-yellow glow of the sun really invades the sky. This gives us a great view of an almost exactly half Mercury. This is a great sign that it's at its greatest elongation as well. It's a couple of days before absolute greatest elongation, but it still looks pretty much like a half from our view through a telescope. If you want to see more of Mercury, it is better to go out later. Mercury's moving around the back of the sun as we come back into the end of November, so we'll see more of its surface, but it will be closer to the orange-yellow glow of sunrise. If you were to go out on the 1st, you'd only see a narrow sliver of Mercury, and again, this view will be affected by that orange-yellow glow. So how you see Mercury and the best time to go see Mercury, it does depend on how much of the planet you want to see. You'll see more of it the closer we get to the end of November, and the closer it is to the orange-yellow glow, you'll see less of it the closer you look to the start of November. So around the 8th, 9th, 10th, they're some of the best days to go and look at Mercury this month, simply because that's when it's out while the sky is still reasonably dark. If we do move right back towards the 1st, you'll see that it gets visibly smaller in the sky. And if we're looking this early at just 6:20, it's pretty much still below the horizon. As the sun rises, it appears in this orange-yellow glow and then vanishes quite soon afterwards. Although luckily Venus does stay with us in the sky, and of course we can take a closer look at Venus as well. It's not going to change as drastically. It orbits the sun much slower. Mercury takes just 88 Earth days to go the whole way around the sun, so it's usually only visible on one side or the other for a few days in a row. Whereas Venus, its year is just a bit shorter than ours, close to 300 days. So over the space of a week, we haven't travelled too far around the sun, and neither has Venus. So if we move here from the 1st all the way through to the 8th, there is a slight change. We can see that Venus has rotated a little, and we can see that how much of Venus is at nighttime does change. Venus is also moving around the back of the sun as we come towards the end of November and the beginning of December, but it won't be after moving so drastically as to have a great effect on our view. Taking a look at Venus through a telescope lets you see this rich blanket of cloud. The clouds on Venus have some water vapor, a lot of carbon dioxide, some sulfur dioxide, some sulfuric acid. Generally, it's a lot of nasty stuff in the clouds on Venus. And these clouds warm the surface of the planet to over 400 degrees Celsius. So we were very surprised to find a gas known as phosphine gas, which is usually the waste product of biological activity. That means it's what's left over after bacteria have ate their dinner. We don't know for sure if there's bacteria in the clouds of Venus, but there's a gas in these clouds that usually only arises when bacteria are performing some metabolic activity. So it gives us a lot of hope, and if we find some life on Venus, it will give us even more hope. Because the conditions on Venus are so extreme, well, if life can survive there, it can probably survive in a lot of other places as well. 400 degrees is an incredibly high temperature. It's a good deal hotter than Mercury. Even though Mercury is closer to the sun, it generally reaches about 170 odd degrees Celsius during the day and cools off below minus 100 at night time, whereas the thick clouds on Venus can keep it up at 350 degrees all through the night, so it never really cools down. This is what we have for the morning sky over the coming week, just 2 planets. Mars will be moving and becoming exclusively an evening time planet as we come into November. However, we've still got the moon, and the moon should be just coming up to its latter half. And indeed it is. So here we go. We can definitely still see the ocean of storms, which I should have mentioned in a previous video. However, the Sea of Tranquility and the football player that I imagine on the moon will not be visible here on the 8th. If we push back towards the 1st, we're still very close to full, so we can still see this shape, which I call the football player, with a head, a body, 2 legs, and a football. The center of that shape is the Sea of Tranquility, where Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong first walked on the moon in 1969. So this will be visible as we enter November, but it will become less and less visible as we approach the middle of the month, and indeed the very middle of November will see us a new moon. However, it will still be visible in the morning as a half moon as we come through the coming week. There's not as much visible in the morning at this time of the year as there is in the evening, simply because in evening time we have 3 planets instead of just 2. However, one of the most famous constellations is still very much a morning time constellation. Just here next to the brightest star Sirius is the constellation Orion. Orion does look fantastic in the evening once we get a little bit further into wintertime, but at the moment, if you would really like to see Orion, it is going to be there in the morning and for the later part of the evening as well. There won't be quite as much to see in the morning over the course of November, but it is one of the best times of the year to see Mercury, which is widely regarded as the most difficult planet visible to the naked eye to actually go out and find. As you can see, it's always very close to the horizon. If these trees were a little bit closer to us or a little bit taller, they could easily block out Mercury. And there are some locations around the world where you're down in a valley and Mercury is simply never visible, always blocked out by the mountains around you. So you may need to move a little to get a good view of Mercury, and you will need to move fast. It's only going to be visible for the next week or 2. So if you do get a chance to see Mercury, let us know, and we hope you get a chance to see all of these beautiful objects over the coming weeks.